You make the decision, and then it just took you.
What we're doing is they've ground down some nutmeg into fine powder. They've then put that into the flasks, and adding ether, they're now trying to get an extract from the nutmeg into the ether, so that in their next stage they're going to do a reflux that's going to move the extract thereafter, so we can try and isolate that.
No, the glass bulb will break. Oh, you got it? Good. Professional. That's that then, good.
So do we stop this when we're refluxing it?
Sorry?
Do we stop it when we're refluxing?
No, you can't. Because you don't stop for a kettle. If you put a cork in a kettle, it explodes. Yeah, so you can't do likewise with this. Right. No, we put the building right next to it.
I think I have enough.
It's not too hot. So you just want it lukewarm, as if it's a hot bath. Right, so there's your hot water. You just want it a hot bath. Right, everybody. With regard to the source of heat, which is hot water, excuse me, when you actually lift the hot water container onto the pear-shaped flask, watch what happens and see how quickly it boils. And look at the condensing which is taking place in the Liebig condenser. If the condensing is taking place at the top of it, there's not enough water going through, or your hot water's too hot, and the Liebig condenser can't cope with it. You don't need to clamp on the Liebig condenser. If you put one on the Liebig condenser, that's fine. But clamp it at the neck of the flask first.
Decomposing, because everything that's come out will go down there.
You've got the anti-clumping gradually. Good. The water on. It's boiling quite vigorously. And if you look just becoming at the top, so you're all right.
So Keith, is it all happening?
It's all happening, yeah.
Yes, what we're doing is we've got some nutmeg. Students have ground up some nutmeg and we've used a solvent. Which solvent?
Ethyl oxy. Ether.
Yes, ether. Yes, well done. We've used ether, and they're extracting a fat from nutmeg, trimestyrene. And what we're doing now is what sort of process?
Reflux.
Yes, reflux. Good.
But we're not using a Bunsen burner.
Good. Why?
Due to the solvent being very volatile and flammable.
Okay. It's very volatile and very flammable.
But we've also added anti-bumper granules so that bubbles flow and that the material remains constant.
Good, good. And what we're going to do next is, once the solvent has dissolved all the trimestyrene, you're going to filter it, and I've just made a special filter paper called not a cello, a fluted filter paper.
Fluted, yeah.
Is it going through? Sorry. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it'll start bubbling on me.
Yes, that's right. And then
It's like, I can't believe it's bubbling without fire. It's so It doesn't like,
No, everything needs to be moved down. It's only just going I can't move it down. I'm going to turn it right. No, don't turn the water off.
It does think it's exploding.
Turn off the water. Yeah, right.
can I just do that bit for you? Is that
The
alright?
water's not hot anymore.
No.
But then boil another load.
That's what's happening. That's bumping. When it goes, you see, go like that, boil in one go, and that will hit the ceiling eventually. Yeah? Yes. Well, what would you think? I do this and it all falls to pieces. So as long as it's, I'm going to bring some more solvent round. Is your boiler? Who's this one? No, that's just swirl it round. What we're trying to do is we're trying to show the students that there are various substances present in natural materials. So yesterday we extracted eugenol, a chemical, from cloves. So we took cloves with steam distillation, and then we did various types of separation techniques to get the eugenol out of oil of cloves. So today we're getting a fat out of nutmeg. Tomorrow we're going to do something slightly different, which is, so far they've been extracting substances from natural materials. We're going to synthesize nature identical products. So tomorrow we're going to synthesize banana oil, and then we're going to synthesize a very difficult reaction called the Friedel-Crafts reaction. We're going to synthesize hawthorn blossom essence. So at the moment you're taking natural products and you're taking things out of them. And then later in the week we're going to start with simpler chemicals, and they're going to cause those chemicals to react, join together, make more complex molecules, and make things which are nature identical to, for example, banana oil compared to banana oil which are present in banana skins. And so therefore they'll be able to smell, I've synthesized this, it smells like banana oil, it's most really present in bananas.
Guys,
Sorry. What we're going to do now, we're coming to the end of the 20 minutes whereby you've been refluxing, and the purpose of the refluxing is to do what? Extract the fat or oil, yes, extract the fat from the nutmeg. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do is which part do we want? The ether or the bits of nutmeg? The ether. Because the fat is dissolved in that ether, in ethoxy K. And we're going to use a fluted filter paper, and we're going to do that in the fume cupboard. The reason we have to do the filtering in the fume cupboard is because this whole room will fill full of ether, because if you're filtering it's exposed to the air. And you're going to you're going to take another little portion of ether, swirl it in the flask, and pour it into the fluted filter paper. So have a read of this method again, and there are going to be two fume cupboards. Charlotte will be in one, not in the fume cupboard, by it, and Kevin will be in the other.
Ready?
Got a label.
right. Get a label
There's a label
on your the flask, and you also go get a rubber bun for that flask as well.
What you're trying to do is to wash out and dissolve any partly dissolved fat. You swirl it and put it in the funnel, in the filter paper, and then you can have a further 10 centimetres cubed of ether, and you can pour that into the funnel as well, into the paper to wash it through. So is there a beaker of ether in each fume cupboard?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter if you pour about another 10 centimetres cubed. Then once you've got that, you need about 20 centimetres cubed in the bottom of the flask at the end of it. And because you're in the fume cupboard, it's all evaporating. The ether is not listening. Because it's in the fume cupboard, everything's evaporating. So you need to use a little bit more ether than you might think. Right? So there's some ether in there, pour it in to let it go down the flask, stop the flask, and then leave the filter paper and the funnel in the fume cupboard.
I'm scared, I don't want to be you.
I wouldn't get the stuff out because it blocked the filter paper. Okay. I'll swirl it around and chuck it in again. I'd wait until these guys are done. You might, yeah, you can probably fit it. And then like, you won't try and leave as much of that in there, just try and get it. Then I'll get it.
That's on the fire.
Oh wait, shake it. You really remind me of my next door neighbour. So bad.
Right, so we'll leave another dirty tray. Excuse me, everybody. It's with the flasks. You need to get them dried. Now, those flasks need to be dried once you wash them out. Yeah, so you need to dry them, and you need to let the air get to them. So try and get them so they're dry. Turn them upside down, and leave on a piece of paper towel or something. Don't put any paper inside because it might never come out again. The last reaction, the Friedel-Crafts reaction, everything has to be dry. Any water in the apparatus will cause it not to work. Because we're using really very reactive chemicals. We're going to be using a whole series of chemicals which either react with water or they react with, well, obviously moisture in the air, anything like that. And so what we're doing, there's another process behind this. They're slowly gaining techniques and confidence with what are expensive pieces of apparatus. And I've just seen them today, you know, they're more confident now with this quick fit apparatus. I mean, these sets cost £170, and you know, one pear-shaped flask is £35. They're able to manipulate them, move them up and down with confidence, put them together, dismantle them. So when it comes to the more difficult reactions later in the week, they won't be worried about the apparatus. They can concentrate fully on the nature of the chemicals they're using, and they'll have to because the chemicals are corrosive, they are reactive, and they need to have the skills to have apparatus which is totally dry.
I was actually quite warm. Hot water goes into the middle.
See swirling lines? That's the part of the bottle you got. That's yours. Is yours part of it? Who's this one?
Way down yonder in Vietnam. Put down your books and pick up a gun. We're gonna have a whole lot of fun. And it's 1, 2, 3. What have we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. The next stop is Vietnam.
And the counterculture, which I already mentioned earlier, is really coming of age and sticking 2 fingers up to the American government and saying, no, we don't want it. So this afternoon we're going to be looking at the ways in which the American youth and the young people of America and the writers of America and so on in the late 60s and the musicians and so on and so forth responded to what we've experienced and made a difference, which again is very, very positive stuff.
In your group, I'm going to give you a big sheet of paper and I want you to bullet point some responses to these 3 questions. And we're going to explore these in more depth, but I want to see what you can come up with first of all. So why did the protest movement develop in America against the war, in the 60s and 70s in particular? On what grounds were people opposing the war? I don't want to know that who's protested, I want to know on what grounds they were actually objecting to this war. And what forms did the movement take? So those are 3 areas for you to contemplate. 50 to 55 in the booklet is going to give you, so you'll all be asked to present back in a little while.
Why, on what grounds and what forms did the protests take? Okay?
One of the reasons why he's saying
We all
So would that be, it wasn't a
30
war.
years coverage, you know, flash. So it's a mixture of beginning of the 60s, sort of goes over the most
And if you look at these...
university, that's right, depending where it in a different sort of way. Perhaps, I think that's in both in the UK, but also in America. The fact that these countercultural figures are because the sort of like, you didn't have that. So sort of what Lenin was doing was far more significant than what the Beatles ever done collectively. No, but obviously, yes, the fact that they provide. Not really. I mean, they were part. Well, I mean, in essence, they were sort of British bands, aren't they? That's one of their and uniquely sort of anglicised or perceived threat. So that also, you know, at the beginning of the sort of 60s, you can argue that you might like
and children. There was that thing about
because they saw
when it actually worked it out, and then presumably you've got problems in the education, you've got social problems, you've got sort of problems in education. Well, we better sort of the domino effect, and let's send our boys in to sort of protect us from that. But by the end of the 60s, and people are arguing there's all this money, and you're spending it on some foxy war over in Asia. You know, come on, we need that money spent here sorting out problems in America. So I think that would be probably another issue. There is some weird
if they believe it's right,
America
then
didn't have
still have the parents' fault that they messed up.
or at least if they were, we don't know about it. Because the money was being soaked up and sort of like, you know, bled out of the country. Actual protests that actually Sydney, protesting around sort of the state capital, the famous mass rally. Minutes more to bring it together, folks, please. We'd like to try and give your feedback. Got a few other bits to get.
We're going to start with the first group. We're going to come down. Who's coming down?
I'm going to hold it.
So 3 questions for you to consider. Why did the protest appear, oppose the war? Why did the protest movement develop, and what forms did the movement take? So if you'd like to take us through your handout, please.
We're doing the second question first.
Okay.
We think the main reason people opposed the war was because it was so brutal and inhumane, and people were actually seeing it, and they could realise what was actually happening and the truth of it, and they must have been horrified. And the fact that they weren't winning and they were fighting a losing battle, and the soldiers and the American public thought it was pointless and that they weren't going anywhere, and they kind of lost the will.
It's very difficult to see a victory in a guerrilla war. Yeah. It's not like an orthodox war where you can say, right, we've won that battle, we've won this battle. It was much harder to measure, and we talked about the body count, that was the way in which the Americans measured it. How many VC dead had they got?
Also, you're not gaining places, are you?
No,
now we're in Berlin, we've sort of with victory,
yeah.
We've symbolically got to Berlin. There were no spaces where you could use that sort of as part of your claims for victory.
So what sort of forms do you think this movement took?
There was public protests, that with big marches.
Yes. Not just in America either. You know, you can see it in most of the cities of Europe.
We saw the pictures from London, didn't we?
Yeah.
And criticism through the media, which was quite. The media determined a lot in that because people could actually see it now.
Yes. And as we said, this is the first media war, so the role of the media is much greater in switching opinion than we've ever seen before. Right, thank you for that, ladies.
Right, okay, try and cover stuff that the other groups haven't covered, all right, as we go round, so that we're constantly getting new ideas.
Yeah, okay.
Well, we've got like development of contraception and narcotics, which results in the the development of the hippie subculture in America, which was obviously very rebellious and all into free love and all that stuff. And so increased counterculture that we've got there. And there were civil rights protests. Now these gave like the anti-Vietnam War protesters quite a lot of ideas about how to conduct a peaceful protest, because they obviously borrowed ideas from like the Greensboro and Nashville sit-ins that we learnt about Tuesday, wasn't it? Anyway, reduced fear of communism. Communism didn't seem to be as much of a threat. There wasn't kind of this red scare that there was in the early 50s where everything seemed to be turning communist. So that obviously gave people less stomach to fight a war against communists if they didn't think it was such a big danger. Media coverage is obviously a very big deal because it brought the war into people's like front living rooms, and Middle America was shocked by all the violence and the huge troop losses, and well, just they were allowed to go everywhere, so it...
And they showed the coffins coming home.
Oh, yeah,
I mean, you see footage of Johnson going to receive these coffins coming with the flags draped over them. And as the numbers build up, the opposition builds up.
And we said that because it's colour TV, it kind of makes it more shocking for people, because black and white, because obviously life is in colour. When you see it in black and white, you kind of disassociate yourself with it. But now it was brought up to date.
Also,
what's this about music at the far end here?
yeah,
that's kind of.
We said that was a form of protest, like Jimi Hendrix and Bob Dylan. They did those protest songs.
And Yoko Ono and John Lennon.
And what sort of age group would that tap into in terms of protest?
Like the hippie age group.
Yeah, it's probably the youth, isn't it?
It was the protesters that we saw on the pictures were mostly young and often like university students. We thought that because the war went on for 13 years, it was probably people who'd sort of grown up to some extent with some knowledge of it, but then they sort of, as they grew up, and they sort of realised just how horrendous it was as sort of part of a coming of age thing, and also again with the sort of the birth of the teenager, it was a way of rebelling against sort of the government and the mainstream authorities.
We reckon they opposed the war because they could see the brutality more clearly because of the increased media coverage, and also because once they started seeing all these pictures of the Vietnamese being killed by the American soldiers, it was a clear contradiction to the reasons they'd been told the Americans were there, because they clearly weren't helping the Vietnamese if they were killing them.
Yep, good point.
What about the use of advanced technology? What have you got in mind there?
It was just,
I agree with you.
Yeah, it was just because like obviously the Vietnamese weren't very technologically advanced, so and the Americans went in, and obviously they have a lot more technology. Obviously by that point they developed the atom bomb and the H bomb.
Well, yes, but they're not using those.
They're not using them, but they've got that threat with them. And
it looked like they were just kind of using too much force on people who weren't resisting in the same way, so it just made them look like huge bullies.
Yeah, so
especially when there were images of them using it on civilians.
Yeah, I mean, you think of the images that you saw of the napalm attacks, the Agent Orange, and then compare that with these photographs from Chu Chi, you know, up against Punji stakes and tunnel warfare. It's a very unequal conflict, and yet it's one that America doesn't win.
Okay, well, I'm trying not to repeat that enough.
Okay, yeah. Okay, well, why did it develop? Obviously there was a lot more media coverage. It was reaching America, you know, through...
It highlighted how bad the war was. The intensity was shown a lot more by the photographic evidence.
Yeah, people getting it on their TVs every day. So there was a lot more awareness of exactly what was happening and the kind of horror, the reality of it that perhaps before Americans hadn't realised in war.
Or they've been shielded.
Or or kind of covered up by the American kind of media and propaganda.
It was quite obviously an unjust war. I mean, the civilian targeting women, children and families.
Plus, you know, America had gone through a number of kind of things, World War II, feminist movements and stuff. There were people a lot more clued up. The youth were kind of more politically aware and kind of, and therefore less trusting of the government and of the American troops and stuff.
Many of the key protests were at universities where obviously students were a lot more in the knowledge of what was happening in the government.
I mean, and in general, people had a slightly new way of thinking. You know, it was developing more. On what grounds, you know, did people oppose the war? Yeah, well, it was unfair. It was seen kind of morally wrong, especially that it was civilians.
The horrific violence on both sides, and the fact that it was completely unnecessary. I mean, that blonde soldier that was on the video did say that they came out of the war having achieved nothing.
Yeah.
It went back to being a communist country, and they couldn't have stopped that. And the domino effect didn't actually work. And I think that America maybe shouldn't have got involved with something that it couldn't have stopped anyway.
In 1965, America's role in Vietnam was extended. To prevent the communist takeover that was feared, more troops were sent.
I have today ordered to Vietnam the Air Mobile Division and certain other forces which will raise our fighting strength almost immediately. Additional forces will be needed later, and they will be sent as requested.
Have to, I will. I have the problem of realizing the attitude of my parents, especially my father. I'm certain that he would consider any refusal of mine to participate as nothing but cowardice, a lack of patriotism.
Students accepted for college could get temporary postponements and were able to join the anti-war protests. But for others, there was no choice.
We said ultimately that once the soldiers themselves started protesting, that arguably, you know, the sort of peace movement won. And Oliver Stone, who made Platoon, and you've just looked at the clip of that, and is perhaps making a film of My Lie for the future, also made Born on the 4th of July, which is the story of Ron Kovic, who was a good old American boy, who sort of decided to enlist for the sort of like the reason some of those GIs were saying in the clip we just looked at, that they wanted to uphold their family tradition, or their dad would have been in Korea and they wanted to sort of keep the military tradition going. He goes over to Vietnam and, as you probably know, is injured and subsequently in a wheelchair. And in the story, he's played by Tom Cruise, Oliver Stone argues that Kovic is a very, very important figure because he was one of the key war vets who, crippled in a wheelchair, was prepared to voice his hatred of what has happened, and because he'd been a good old American boy but had become someone who was angry about his involvement, his voice was made all the more powerful. So in this sequence we see him and other peace protesters who are wounded, and some of the hippies and so on, protesting at a Nixon rally and trying to make their point. When I think that this is...
Yeah, this is the Vietnam Veterans Against War organisation. You'll see this Rusty Sachs guy that you saw interviewed before in the clip after this one.
And it emerges into a sort of a very violent sort of protest that reflects the sort of Kent State one. So I mean, I think in many ways that's a good way to sort of bring it together, isn't it? And to see that the peace protest, which sort of is a sort of a counterculture thing in the early part of the 60s, obviously gains weight. These key events that you picked up on, sort of Tet Offensive, My Lie, etc., give it more credence. The involvement with more and more celebrities and pop stars with this, things like Woodstock still make a difference. But even in 1972, when you finally got the vets on the side of the peace protesters, there's still conflict going on, brilliantly evoked in the film, between those die-hard traditional Americans with their die-hard traditional values and the peace protesters, and the bitter irony, of course, at the end there of Nixon saying, let's give these guys the respect that they deserve, where we're seeing them hustled and dragged out of their wheelchairs and dragged out of the building by FBI, CIA, or whoever it is doing that.
It was quite shocking because I didn't realise how brutal the fighting was, and it isn't until you start studying that you realise how bad it is, and I think it's important for everyone to know that, because otherwise that's when that sort of mistake occurs again in future generations.
History does repeat itself, and we've seen that actually people haven't necessarily learnt the lessons of Vietnam, and that it's important because, like, I would say that the Iraq War has a lot of very strong parallels with Vietnam.
Absolutely.
And that's something that Britain as a nation has been more involved with than with Vietnam, obviously, because we never sent troops to Vietnam, and I think it's important that we learn about that sort of thing in the past so that we can try and learn from it, because otherwise there's sort of no hope that it'll never stop repeating.
Hannah?
I was going to say that I don't learn about Vietnam at GCSE, so it was really interesting to learn about it, and I mean, I'll go back to school and I'll say to my friends about it, and but I think it's really good that we should learn about it, because obviously we don't do it at GCSE, so I think it's good that I know about it and I'll tell others about it, because as Hannah and Rachel said, we need to know it for future, for when we hopefully won't fight, but to not make the same mistake again. But so I think it's good that we've studied it, because I haven't done it at GCSE, so I was really shocked.
I think all the sort of noble preconceptions that we have about war, with World War I, World War II, all the men going off to fight and then winning medals and everything, sort of is completely removed by the Vietnam War. I mean, how is any of that noble or correct to do when it shouldn't have really happened?
Well, what we've been doing is we've been doing a sort of very frenetic one-week look at American culture in the 20th century. We've been looking at various sort of key moments, obviously, to sort of manage this material. So we've used the Depression, we've used the Civil Rights Movement, we've used the atomic bomb, we've used McCarthyism, and today we've been using Vietnam as a sort of way in which we can sort of holistically show the students, you know, the development of America during the 20th century. Our focus has often been historical source material, but we've also been using film, pop music, clips from television programmes, literature, poetry, etc. to reinforce the message. So for the students who've come on this summer school, what they're getting, which they would never get in school, is a very holistic view of something, you know, and also, of course, the time to study it in great detail, you know, going away today at the end of the day exhausted after 4 days of it, and no doubt looking forward, I hope, to the next day as well.
Did you feel that from the reactions that you've got so far that it's been a success?
Yes, yeah, I mean, obviously we try and evaluate each day and get some immediate feedback on what we've been doing, and certainly the students here, you know, have been giving us very positive feedback, you know, explaining the sorts of thing I've said, that they like this because it's an intense experience with peers who are sort of interested, unlike perhaps a normal classroom experience where they're, you know, 2 or 3 interested and the majority are not. So the feedback has been very good. In fact, some of the students this year were here on our previous course last year where we did something similar on British culture, so it's nice to see those faces again.